Kum Lenin, a black Gemara. We are up to Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. This is the Gemara for Shabbos, which is actually the 9th day of Av. The Gemara is up to here, the Gufa. We're going to analyze what Rav Chizda said. What did Rav Chizda say? Rav Chizda, we had a whole discussion about Kamle B'Derabba B'nei, and we introduced Rav Nechunya ben Akana, who says that not only Kamle B'Derabba said regarding a capital punishment issued by a Bezdin, but even Koris, which is B'dei Shemayim, according to Baya, even Misa B'dei Shemayim, and there's a monetary payment as well, you're potter because of Kamle B'Derabba B'nei. And then we introduced Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said that if you stole the fats, even according to Nechunya, if you eat treifa fats, you get Koris. If you stole treifa fats, you still have to pay for it. And the reason is because they're not happening concurrently. The Isser of Geneva and the Isser of eating the fat didn't happen at the same time. As soon as you lifted it, you did a kinyan known as Hagbah, lifting it. And you're not chayiv for eating it until you consume it. So because they're not happening at the same time, you have to pay that monetary payment. So now we're going to analyze what Rav Chizda said. Says in Gufa, let's analyze it at the top of the page. Rav Chizda said, Moide Rav Nechunya ben Akana. Rav Nechunya ben Akana is Moide begoiniv chel b'shel chaved. If you steal treifa fats from your friend, and you ate it, you chayiv that you have to pay money. Why is that? Shekvan is chayiv begneva koidem sheyava le'isa chaylev, because you're already liable for the geneva before even you ate the chaylev. As soon as you lifted it, you did kinyan hagbah. So the Gemara says, Lema, let us say that this pliga argues with Rab Avin. Now, what is the din of Rab Avin? The Amar Rab Avin said, Hazoydek chaytz mitchilas arba l'seif arba. Throw an arrow from one. If on Shabbos you're not allowed to carry 4 amas in the street, and you basically threw an arrow 4 amas in the street, right? You didn't isa deraisa. At the same time, the kora shirayim malichasa, you ripped apart somebody's material, coat, silk, while it was going. So now there's a monetary compensation. So the question is, you have to pay them now. Potter, you are potter. Why are you potter? Now, we consider it as if it happened at the same time. Why is it as if it happened at the same time? Because in order for the arrow to land 4 amas away, you have to first pick it up over here. So therefore, the Isser of carrying a Shabbos doesn't start when it landed. It starts the moment you picked it up. And during the Isser, in the interim period, you also rip somebody's clothes, so you owe them money. And therefore, it's considered bevasachas. At the same time, it's called kamle b'derabba b'nei. So our question now is, what is the Rav Chizda? Hochanamit here too. In order to eat the fat, you have to first lift it. So therefore, l'chayda, the Isser of eating fat started already from the moment you lifted it. Is so l'chayda again? They're both having a tandem. So it should be common to Rabbi. Hochanam here too. Isn't the only way you can eat it is by first lifting it. So it's as if the Isser began the moment you lifted it. So you became a ganav then, and the Isser of eating started at the same time. Now, even though we had a discussion yesterday of Ashi, says that if misa lazeh umaman lazeh, we had a discussion whether we say that it's kamle b'derabbanei or not. Over here, according to everybody, the way the relearned pshat, this is not considered misa lazeh umaman lazeh, not like Rava and Rava holds that Ravashi says misa lazeh umaman lazeh is also kamle b'derabbanei, but Rava disagrees. But this says that the Ri and Tesis we talked about yesterday is not considered misa lazeh mammon lazeh. The misa is to Hashem, eating treifa fats, and mammon is to the person who owned the treifa fats. It's not considered because it's one act. The difference is whether it's one act or it's 2 acts. Because in the Gemara we learned yesterday, you were eating truma, and separately with your other hand, you were ripping somebody's clothes. 2 separate acts. Over here, it's the same act, throwing the arrow, or lifting the fats in order to eat it. It's all one maisa, and one maisa is not considered mitzvah lazeh or mam lazeh. It's becoming rabbaneh. So Chizda says that it's considered coming rabbaneh because it's all happening concurrently. And Rav Avin says all happening concurrently from an arrow. Chizda said no, it isn't. First you stole, and then afterwards you ate it. What's going on here? Says the Gemara. What are you comparing the two? Now, not everyone agrees with Rabbi Avin because Rabbi Meir, the way many Rishonim learn in Bava Kama, argues. But the question is whether Chizda argues as well or not. Says the Gemara, what are you comparing the 2 cases? You're comparing the case of Shabbos to the case of eating treifa fats. Hassam over there, in order to get it there, you have to first lift it over here. So because it's impossible for the hanocha to happen without the akira first, therefore we say the Isa started from the beginning. There are many different ways of learning pshat, but one of the ways is that carrying is made up of a number of components. It needs to be an akira. lifting, there has to be transporting, and then there's a placing down, hanacha. If you're missing any of these three items, you're not chayiv. So there's a big machlekes. So which one is the condition and which one is the iser and which is the trigger? Is the iser, the Gemara thought the iser is when you put it down. That's when it becomes usher. You have to pick it up, but the iser is when you put it down. But the Gemara is saying no. Carrying is made up of components. Akira is just as much a part of the iser as the hanach is, and therefore the iser of carrying starts from akira. And during that time, you rip somebody's coat. So therefore, it's happening in the same time. On the other hand, lifting has nothing to do with eating. You can eat without lifting. How? You don't have to necessarily lift it in order to eat it. The one you can bend down and eat it, and you won't become a ganef. Why won't you become a ganef? The way Rashi learns is in order to be koine kinyan hagbah, lifting it has to be 3 tefachim high. So if you put it on the floor and you bend down all the way to the floor and you eat it, it's below 3 tefachim. You never did hagbah, you never lifted it. So the iser therefore is uncoupled from the lifting, and you can do one without the other. So therefore, when are you chayiv for eating the fat? When you ate it, not any time before that. So therefore, they became a ganef, and the eating came 2 different times. Many of the Shayim argue with Rashi. First of all, they hold hagbah is only 1 tefah, not 3 tefachim. But apart from that, they say this is not kinyan hagbah. This is kinyan yad, which is like chatzah. If it's in your hand, the reason why you're kinyan is because it's in your hand, not because you lifted it. And the Gemara and the Ksas and the series that talks about it. But the Gemara, however, is saying over here, according to them, that you could have had the food on the tip of a stick and just bent down to the stick and eaten it without putting it in your hand at all. You don't have to put it in your hand at all. That's the point. So there's no hagbah and there's no kinyan yad. It's just in your mouth. And at the same time, you're eating it. So therefore, it's happening in tandem. So bottom line is, when it comes to chaylev, you don't have to necessarily lift it in order to eat it. So therefore, it's 2 separate things, 2 separate times, and there's no common rabbaneh. When it comes to carrying a Shabbos, the akira is part of the aveda, and therefore, and you cannot put it down before you pick it up. So therefore, it's considered one long malacha, and somewhere in between, you rip somebody's coat. It's kamle midrabbaneh. That's answer number 1. Inami, or another answer. Hasam over there. When it comes to that, once it leaves your hand, you can never retrieve it. Which means what? Which means that everything that can happen later already happened now. The moment is because all the koyches you put in is right now. So everything happened already now. So you put in the koyach to rip the guy's coat, and you put in the koyach also to land. So it all happened at that moment when you threw it into the propelled it into the air. In the case of the fat, you picked it up. You still don't have to necessarily eat it. You can go back and put it back. And therefore, it doesn't happen until it actually happens. In the case of stealing the fat, nothing happened until it happens. In the case of the arrow, the moment you left your hand, you put into there already everything that's going to happen later already was placed into the kayach, that centrifugal force that you placed there is already there. And therefore, as if it all happened at the same time. So what's in these 2 ways of explaining it in halacha? There's a big difference. What about instead of throwing an arrow, you're carrying a knife in public street, you're carrying it now. Okay, you did akira, you walked 4 amas, and you did hanacha, and while you're walking, you ripped somebody's coat. You ripped somebody's silk on the way you're going. So now, but in this case over here, if the word is that hanacha means that akira is one of the components, and akira and hanacha, they're for the same thing here. If while you're walking, you were doing the malacha of carrying it, because malacha carrying doesn't start when you put it down; it starts already when you lift it, and therefore it both happen in tandem. But if the word is it happened in the same second, because as far as you're concerned, vis-a-vis you, when you threw it over here, you're walking with it, so everything happens as it happens, and therefore when since you didn't complete the malacha Shabbos, you put it down. Meanwhile, you ripped the guy's clothes way before then. It's not happening in tandem. You would be chayiv for money. According to this expression, you say that it's impossible. It's all part of the same malacha, lifting, putting it down. The hochanami here too. Who cares if you walk with it? The fact is, you have to pick it up in order to put it down. So the akira and hanacha both form 2 parts of the same malacha. So malacha begins from the akira. So you were doing the malacha of Shabbos while you were walking, and then you read the kol. According to that expression, it says according to one who says that it actually happened at the same time. When you threw it, but then you put in all the keiches into there at that moment, and therefore it all happened at the same time. And the coat that's going to be ripped, and the fact that it's going to land soon. The hoch over here, much mental. Since over here you can always just stop you're walking. Therefore, nothing happens until it actually happened. And because nothing happens until it actually happens, therefore you rip the coat before you stopped and made the hanacha. Okay, these are the 2 answers. Let's analyze what Rav Avni says. Amar Abba Rami says, Hazoidik Chait, if somebody throws an arm into the Abba, so if I was getting a 4 to end of 4, Rekora Shiroyin, Bahalichosai, and he ripped somebody's going, Potter, your Potter. Why? Shakida, Tzerech Anochin. We just explained. You have to lift it in order to put it down. Therefore, since he did it the whole entire time, the malach says he want to be better by. But I asked a question. We learned Hageinev keys b'Shabbos. There's different ways of acquiring something, but in order to become a ganef, you have to do a valid kinyan. And once you did a kinyan, it makes it yours. Not that it belongs to you. It makes it yours that you're chayiv and you're responsible for the einzin. Anything accident that happen later, it's your responsibility. Now, one kinyan is called hagbah, lifting it. In order to be hagbah, wherever I am, if I lift it, since it's in my hands, even if I'm in the victim's house, I was kained. Another form of kinyan is mashicha, dragging it out, taking it out, schlepping it to my rishus. I have to take it out of the rishus of the victim's house in order for me to acquire it by dragging it, called mashicha. Otherwise, if it's still in his house, I wasn't kained. If something accident happens, I'm not. If it's an accident, I'm not a mazik, because an accident might be not liable, whatever it is, or an accident happened later, I'm not liable. I left it there, but that's called kinyan mashicha. So it's kinyan hagbal lifting it and kinyan mashicha dragging it. Kinyan mashicha also does not apply everywhere. We have a machlekes imada whether if you take it into a shusarabim out of the victim's house, are you kinyan mashicha? Because maybe it has to be in your own house or in a side street where you have some ownership, not if it's in a public space, as we'll see. So here are two possible scenarios. I'm going to kill the Shabbos. You stole a while the Shabbos, chayv yachayv. Why are you chayiv? Because as soon as you lifted it, you did kinyan hagbah, and you're not chayiv for Shabbos. They took it outside, so they're not happening in tandem. You were chayiv neighbor first. What about how you megara the yaitzi? You were dragging on the ground. Megara the yaitzi, you were dragging on the ground. Then you are potter. Why are you potter? Because what kinyan are you doing now? Not hagbah. You're doing mashiach, right? You're dragging it on the ground. And mashiach, you're not kain until you leave the house. So when are you chayiv? When you chayiv mashicha, when you take it outside. When are you chayiv Shabbos, when you take it outside. So they're both happening at the same time. Come to Dravane, you're a potter. Potter. Shadi Shabbos. We can never come at the same time. Now the question is very simple. You tell me in the first part of this first part, you tell me if you picked it up, you're chayiv. He said, if you picked it up, you're chayiv. When I ask a question, let us say, the only way you can get outside is by picking it up. And because the only way you can get it outside is by picking it up, so the Isser of Haitzah started the moment you picked it up. So Geneva and Shabbos happened at the same time, following Rab Oven's logic. So the Rishonim have a very difficult time with this Gemara's question, because if you follow the second lashon of Gemara, which is that if you can, it's only when you throw it, as Rab Oven says, that it all happen at the same time. But if you're walking, he says you can always stop. It's not happening at the same time. So what's Gemara's question? So obviously the Gemara's question is not according to that opinion. It's only according to the first way, is which that hagbah, lifting it. The only way you can take it outside is by lifting it. So therefore, it started from the moment you lift it. But then they all ask a question, but you could have dragged it on the floor. Like the second, since you could have dragged it on the floor, you didn't have to lift it. So again, why does the Isser of Shabbos start from Hagbah? So Tais is another Shem answer. I mean, the different ways of learning Shabbos. Tais' answer is very simple. It doesn't matter whether you lift it or you drag it. Either way, the moment you move it from its original place, that's called Akira. And the Isser of Shabbos starts from that moment. So I don't care if you drag it or you lift it. The fact is, the Isser of Shabbos started the same moment that you were starting to do the Gneva. Or sometime during that carrying it, transporting it, you did the Geneva. So the Gemara's question is, so why are you potter l'chayded? So why do you say here that you're chayiv because Geneva happened first? No, it didn't. Shabbos and Geneva have to stay together. Answer the Gemara. Hachamash, you know what we're talking about here. When you lifted it, you only were liable for Geneva. You were not liable for Shabbos. And why not? Because you lifted it al manas l'hatzniya. You lifted it in order to take it outside. So when you made the Akira, you had no intention of doing a Aveira of Shabbos. You thought you'll hide it in another room. So you were a Ganef because you lifted it. And then afterwards, you decided to take it outside. So the Isser of Shabbos only started after you changed your mind. So it didn't happen at the same time. Now, this could be a problem based on the Gemara we look at Shabbos. If you remember, we look at Shabbos, Rabbi Yechon said that in order for you to be Chayiv on Shabbos, the Akira already had to have intention to do the Malacha. In other words, if you picked up something to take to another room, and then while you're walking, you change your mind, you went outside, Mahatari, you're not Chayiv, because where's your Akira? When you lifted it, you had no intention of doing an Avera, and you had no intention of taking it outside. So if that's the case over here, then why are you Chayiv Shabbos at all? Says the Gemara, So one said, "How come I skin? She give me to hide it. When you change your mind, but he took it outside. So you want to gave me chayv. Would you even be chayv? Well, didn't they say that I'm a fan of chaytzim if you're moving objects around from one corner to another corner, so that when you lifted it in the first place, you had no intention of carrying it out. Then when you change your mind, but he took it outside. Pater. Why you putted? Because you had no intention whatsoever of taking it outside. So there's no Shabbos. And yet it says over here clearly that you're chayiv for Shabbos also, but two separate times. You're right. Late time I'm not, let's see, you misunderstood. Not telling you taking it outside in order to hide it. You actually had in mind to take it outside. No, so the question goes back. So when you lifted it, you became a ganav. When you lifted it, you started doing your malach of carrying outside. You know how my skin you lifted it, you want to take it outside, but then you stopped before you went outside. The moment you stopped, you made a hanocha to that akira. So therefore it's over. There's no Aved of Shabbos. And then when you started walking again to take it outside, that's a new akira. So the Gneva happened the first akira, the Shabbos happened with the second akira. And therefore it's not happening at the same time. Says the Gemara, Kisha Ahmad Lamai. So Gemara says, what did you stop for? Just to fix your bundle on your shoulder. In other words, you made a pause. That's not a stop. That's a normal way of walking. That would be considered a stop, and it still relates back to the first akira. Must be a she stopped to take a rest. It was a heavy thing, so you took it up to the door, you stopped for a minute to take a rest, and now you're starting again. So it's a new akira, and that's the akira of Shabbos. So the first akira, you were akira for a ganef, the second one you're for Shabbos. Says the Gemara, so what are you telling me? I will casa, but if you would have just stopped to fix it up on your shoulder, my pata, you'd be pata taka. Why? Because then the first akira would be the Easter of Shabbos. So the same time you became a ganef, you were over Shabbos to become a b'jamene. So it's a difference why you stopped. If you stop to fix your bundle on your shoulder, then it's a continuation of your first akira. So Geneva and Shabbos are happening simultaneously. But if the reason you stopped is just to take a rest, so then it's a new akira. So Shabbos and Geneva are happening two different times. If so, Adatani, why do we make a distinction between Megara and between dragging it on the floor? Or whether you lifted it and you say you lifted it, you're telling me that can never happen first. But if you're dragging the floor, Shabbos is going to come together, it's better. Learn the same case of lifting it. But say within that, there's two possibilities. Sometimes it's common drop, and sometimes it is. Depends why you stopped. Let's talk about itself. Only if you're rested, you stop, take a rest. Then we say that what the Geneva and Shabbos happened two different times. If you just did it to fix your bundle, then potter, because the Geneva started when you lifted it the first time, and Shabbos started lifted the first time. So we're talking about Ben Azai. We're going to introduce a new idea. Nobody stopped anywhere. It goes according to Ben Azai. And because it goes according to Ben Azai, in all instances, Ben Azai says, a famous saying, the Ben Azai says, if you're walking from a private place to a public space, walking through a carmelis, according to Chachamim, you lifted it in your house, you walked out through a side street, and then you went into the big public street. They say the Hanocha was in the public street. That's Haitzah. You're liable on Shabbos, and you get skill if you're worn, or bring a korchatas. But Ben Azai says, no, mahalach ka'emadami. As the Rishonim explained, when you're changing your rishus, when you're changing your domain, every step is like an akira, and then you put your foot down as hanocha, akira, hanocha, akira, hanocha. And therefore, it's as if he took it from the yochid, placed it in a carmelis, and then as if he took it from the carmelis, placed it in the which means you're only osam in the rabbanon. There's no isa derais over here. So according to Ben Azai, you became a ganef when you lifted it. True, you had intention to walk outside, but every step you put down, you made a hanocha. So it's only the last step before you walked out the door, which is the akira for the haitzah. Even though within the house itself, we don't count every step as an akira hanacha. True. But when you're about to change from the house into the street, that last step is the akira for the street, which is a new akira. So the Shabbos started a step, your ultimate step in the house, but the Gneva started the first step. Go to Ben Azai. Now, according to Ben Azai, everybody asks, so how are you ever chayiv walking 4 amos in the Shus Rabbim? If mahalach ka'imedam, every time you make a step and you put the foot down, you just put it down. You never walk 4 amos in one go. So Taisus in Shabbos says that the only way according to Ben Azai that you be chayiv is if you or Taisus actually brings it as well, is if you broad jumped the 4 amos. That's how you chayiv. Others say it's halacha Moshe Sinai. Others say that if it's in the same rishus, we don't say mahalach ka'imedam. Since 4 amos is considered one unit, so putting your foot down in between is not considered as if ka'imedam. Anyway, so that's how we're going to answer it. That Shabbos and Geneva are happening 2 different times if you follow Ben Azai. Says the Gemara. But according to Ben Azai, he'll agree. Let's say instead of carrying it out. You threw it out, then you became a ganef. And Shabbos at the same time, because when you threw it out, it left your hand and landed in the street. So the Easter Shabbos started the moment you picked it up to throw it, and you became a ganef at the same time. So Shabbos and Geneva are coming at the same time. So why do we bring a distinction between dragging on the floor or lifting it? Talk about lifting it, and depends what you did with the object. Did you throw it, or did you walk out with it? My pot and nifling if you're walking out with it, then we say, well, that Shabbos happens after the Gneva because Mahalach Koimedam. I was ready, but if you threw it out, potter, you should be potter because Shabbos and Gneva happen at the same time. Says so, you're right. But the reason why we talked about Megar B'Yotz is to introduce to you the idea of dragging the floor that you are chayiv. Taisa, by the way, asked another Shem asked, according to Rabbeinu Tam, who holds a hagbah, is only one tefer from the ground. So he asked a question. We know the laws of Shabbos. There's a concept called love that within 3 tefachim of the ground, there's different lying on the ground. So Gneva always happens before Shabbos. When you lifted 1 tefach from the ground, you became a ganef. You did hagbah, but your Easter of Shabbos doesn't begin until you lifted 3 tefachim above the ground. So what's the Gemara the whole time talking about is happening in tandem. So they say, according to you must learn pshat that it's talking about it's not on the floor, it's on a stick, which is not 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and therefore, or it's some way that you're lifting it, or on a table or something, not on the floor. So therefore, there's no lavud, and when you lift it, Shabbos and Geneva happen at the same time. Anyway, so the Gemara answers, there's a chiddush in Megar B'Yotz. What is the chiddush in Megar B'Yotz? So the Gemara. And that is, I would have thought that it's not the normal way of carrying. Normally, you lift something, you don't drag on the ground, and if it's not the normal way of carrying, maybe not even chayiv Shabbos. Kamashlan, that you are. So the Gemara. What kind of things are we talking about that we say it's not the normal way? Either large cases or large boxes, heavy. That's a normal way. Of course, you chayiv Shabbos. What's the chiddush? And even the zutri, if it's a very small case, you takanat chayiv. Lav urchu. Then you takanat chayiv Shabbos. It's not a normal way of carrying it. Ella b'mitzvah, we're talking about something in between, which means some people carry, some people drag, and therefore it tells you that you should know that dragging is also chayiv. You would think that you only have to lift something on Shabbos, akira and anacha. Dragging is not really called akira. You never really picked it up from the ground. It tells you that it's called akira. Why? Because it moved from its original place. That's the chiddush. Says the Gemara, the afterlech, where did you take it out? You're telling me that Megar B'Yotz Shabbos, it can never happen at the same time. Right now, the Gemara is on the assumption, like those opinions that say that if you take it to a shusarabim, there's no kinyan. It has to be to a side street or to your private place. Like, where'd you drag it out to? The stolen item. Either to a public place. Easter Shabbos, of course, you chayiv Shabbos. But Easter Gneva lekka, there's no Easter Gneva because Meshicha, you didn't lift it, just a Meshicha. Meshicha is not the shusarabim. And either after Shusayachim took it out to a private place, so therefore, let's say your house was contiguous to your neighbor's house, so therefore you just took it from his house to yours, so therefore you're kind of Meshicha because you put it in your house. But where's the Easter Shabbos? Easter Gneva Ikob is Shabbos like the Easter Shabbos. Says the Gemara, we needed the Afke L'Tzidei Shusarabim. We needed the Afke L'Tzidei Shusarabim, that you took it to a side street. A side street, you're chayiv for Geneva, Meshichik, it works, and also Shabbos. Now, why would you be chayiv Shabbos as a side street? It's only a Carmelist. So the Gemara, come on, which opinion are we following it? Now, side Tzidei Shusarabim means we already had it before. It's right next to the street. You put in these buffers that people shouldn't have their wagons and wheels going onto your private property. So you put these different kinds of barriers to keep them a little bit away. And therefore, from those barriers inside, it's still really Shusarabim, but it's the side, and most people don't go there. So Gemara says, now the machlek is if tzidei shusarabim is considered shusarabim or not. If it's Rabbi has Gemara shops, and if it's like Rabbi tzidei shusarabim, don't mean that the side shusarabim is like a shusarabim. So then Easter Shabbos, then again, if it's halachically like a shusarabim, then weiter you have Easter Shabbos, but there's no gneva because you can't have Mashiach. If it's treated like a shusarabim, there's no gneva. If it's not treated like a shusarabim, there's no Shabbos. So what's going on here? Easter Shabbos, easy gneva. There's no Geneva. And if you follow the Rabban, the whole is not considered Shusarabim, the Amli Tzidei Shusarabim, Lav Shusarabim, then it's the other way around. Easter Geneva, there is Easter of Geneva, but Easter Shabbos lekka, there's no Easter Shabbos. Says Gemara, Lo Olam K'Rabbi Eliezer. We're following Rabbi Eliezer that holds that as far as the laws of Shabbos are concerned, it's treated like a Rishus Harabim. But as far as the laws of Mashiach are concerned, it's not considered Rishus Harabim, and therefore you will be Koine Geneva. That's how come we can have Geneva and Shabbos at the same time. Why, as far as the laws of Mashiach, is not considered Geneva? Because the fact is there aren't too many people there. As far as the laws of Shabbos are concerned, it's part of it's contiguous Rishus Harabim and so on. Therefore, it's part of Rishus Harabim, and Rishus Harabim can go into there if they want to. But as far as Mashiach is concerned, the fact is that the majority of people don't go beyond these barriers. So therefore, it's considered private enough that you can be kind, dragging it to yourself. So look up pleasant. When do we say the side streets are like a Sharabim, Hanimilin, the Shabbos, as far as Shabbos is concerned? So therefore, when you drag it into there, you'll be Chai for Shabbos. The Zimin, the Dochki Rabim, sometimes there's a lot of people in the street, and therefore it's squishy. The idle hustle people, you go behind the barriers to walk out of the big crowds. But as far as Mashiach is concerned, you will be kind, because the fact is that most people don't go there. And therefore, we have an example here of Geneva and Shabbos falling out, coinciding when they are being taken out of the house. My time, the fact is that you don't have too many people there. Okay, so that's one answering model. We'll have two more. Avashi, you have two more answering models. Avashi comes along and says, no, you want to know how, if we're talking about regular Shusarabim. I was a regular Shusarabim, I'm Chai for Shabbos, but how can I be Mashiach for Geneva? How can I be Chai Geneva? Because we're taking it into Shusarabim and dragging something there that it does not become yours. So the Rashi says, keep going, for example, Shetzirif Yoder Lemata Mishleisha. We're going to learn the Gemara, the version of Rashi, which to show you, find it difficult to understand, but this is what Rashi learned. What happened was you dragged whatever the item was that you took, and you placed it into your other hand. You place your other hand below 3 tvachim. Now your hand is not considered 4 tvachim; it's not a makom chashuv. But what you did was, you put your other hand below 3 tvachim within the ground, and with the right hand you were dragging it. The left hand you placed it close to the ground, and you took your right hand, whatever the object was, and you placed it into your left hand. And what happens then is Kiderava. We'll follow Rava. The hand of a person, we know by the laws of Shabbos, in order to be chayiv, putting something down, it has to be put down in a chashuva place, has to be put down in a place of 4x4. Regarding Hakidah, machlekes, but regarding Hanoch, it has to be put down in a place of 4x4. The moment we establish that for the laws of Shabbos, it's considered an independent place. So therefore, we will take now and say for the laws of Mashiach, it's considered as if it's a private, independent place, because we'll treat it as if it's above 3 tvachim. As far as Shabbos is concerned, since now it's a makom chashuv, so we will treat it as if it's above 3 tvachim, different, separate from the ground. It's as if you lifted it. By placing it in your hand below 3 tvachim, it's as if you did hagbah. Remember, Mirash's hagbah needs to be 3 tvachim. It's as if you lifted it above 3 tvachim from the ground. Why? Because your hand now is a mokum chashuv. So when did you become a ganef? You never picked it up in the victim's house. You dragged it on the ground, and therefore you became a ganef only when you brought it to Sarabim, and that's when you chai for Shabbos. So they're both happening at the same time. The Tais and all the Rishonim have a hard time understanding what does the laws of Shabbos have to do with the laws of Kinyan, and therefore they have a whole different gears in the Gemara with different shot. Okay, by the Gemara. Rav Acha, third thing. Rav Acha says, I disagree with you totally. Who said that you cannot be Kohen Mashiach? This is Rabbi. Rav Acha Masna Hochi. That's how what we said till now was Rav Acha. But Ravina came along and said, no. No, you did Mashiach. This is Rabbi. And we hold that Mashiach is effective in the Shusarab. And so we have a big machlekes between Ada and Ravina. Rav Acha says that the assumption we had till now, you cannot make Mashiach Rishus Rabin. And Ravina says you could. And what's the basis of this argument? But you could do we're arguing the following Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah, and the question is a relation the safe, and each one makes an inference from one or the other. It says in the Mishnah, you were dragging something, and you took it out of the house of this victim. You were stealing an animal from the owner. And what happened was a mace. And while you were stealing the animal died. The question is, are you responsible or not? It was an accident. Are you responsible or not? So it depends. Bishus buy them if it's still not owner of the house, potter. Why? Because you were never koine and it was an accident. So what are you responsible for? You're not a mazik, the animal died. Potter. But if you lifted it inside the house of the victim, the moment you lifted it became yours. And anything that happens after that, you are responsible for. It's yours as far as responsibility. Or you took it out of the Rishus Bailim, but mace died, chayiv. If after that event it came out, then you are chayiv. That's the two parts. One part is if it happened while it was in the Rishus Bailim, you are potter. But if you picked it up or you took it outside and then it died, you are chayiv. So Ravina Dayik Mereisha, Ravina will make his diak from the beginning of this Mishnah, Ravacha Dayik Mesefer. And it goes as follows. Ravina Dayik Mereisha, it says in the Reisha, you were dragging it, in other words, you weren't cutting it yet. And it died, made, which was violent, pot, you pot. So the reason why you pot it is time of the made, which was violent. What happens what happens the moment you took it out, I don't care where you took it. It sounds from here that even if you took it to a Rishus Rabin, even if you took it to Rabin, you're responsible. Why? Because you were kind of. So clearly, we see Mashiach, the moment you take it out of the original owner's house, it became yours. But you're just dragging it, you're just making it walk along around. Seems from here that Mashiach is kind of anywhere outside of the victim's house, even in a public street. Chayiv. That's the diak of Ravina. Rav Acha died the other way around. Rav Acha says, it says it, when are you chayiv if you took it out or you lifted it? If you lifted it so it became yours, or you took it out. Since we gave two examples, and that means taking out, stam taking out doesn't make it chayiv. It's only taking out that similar to hagbah. Just like hagbah brings it into your rishus, so you lift it in your hand. So too, when you took it out, it has to be into your rishus. In other words, it can't be in a public street. You have to take it somewhere, which is a side street or your house. Thinking about okay, very nice. So what's each one going to do with the diak of the other person? But of course, Rav is difficult. The Reisha says that if it died in the owner's house, then you pot it. But the moment it left the owner's house, you're chayiv. I don't care where it went. That means Mashiach is Kodesh Rabbi, Kasha and Ravina, Kasha Rav. And the Ravina Kasha Sefer. The Sefer says only if you lifted it or you took it out. That means it's taking out, just like lifting. Kasha and Ravina. That means you take it to your place. He says, he says, all it says is you have to take it out of the shus of the original owner. That means you have to bring it into your own shus. As long as he didn't bring it to your own shus, even if it's in the street, it's still considered the shus of the original owner. And Sefer Ravina Lekasha, the Sefer is brother Ravina, is have to turn by it, because he saw Dumi the Hagbah. Who said that you came up with this idea that taking it out is just like lifting it, then you have to bring it into your rishus? Who said that? I don't believe in that. So therefore, if it works or if it doesn't work. Everyone has a question. What do you mean Mashiach doesn't work in a Rishus Rabin? We're going to learn about Matzia there in the Lafir Aleph. That if you have 4 amas, wherever you are, even in the public street, it belongs to you. So therefore, if you drag something into the street, like a gneva or something, it becomes yours. Mashiach should be kind. So that Tesis there answers about Matzia that, and the Rishonim talk about that, since the whole thing is that takanas are chamim, we don't want osilin, so you want people to fight in the street who know who belongs to, but we're not going to make this takana to help somebody be kind of gneva, and therefore arba amas is not kind of Rishus Rabbim if it's by gnevas. We're not going to help them out. Okay, everyone have a good day tomorrow.